Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. We're focused on talking to food and beverage brands that are on a mission to make the world better.
Hey everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Firebelly Social Show, where we speak to founders and CEOs of mission-driven companies. We got a great show for you today. I wanted to quickly introduce a sponsor message. This show is sponsored by Firebelly Social, a company I helped start that focuses on food and beverage companies and helping them tell their stories using social media. I'm particularly excited today for our guest, but also because we have my colleague and friend Arnell on the show today. Hi, Arnell.
Hi, well, I'm super happy to be here, excited to be here for sure.
And we've got Michael Schultz, serial entrepreneur. I mean, this guy's story is just so interesting. Michael, you set out, you've really changed the world. And you've particularly revolutionized the world of contract food service. And you brought it into the modern day, really, right? I think it's what you do has made food service more relevant. And as you say, it's only limited by the scope of your imagination. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, and good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. And I know some of you can't see this, but Michael, you win the prize for the best hat ever worn out of the 60 or 70 guests we've had. You've got the best hat. It's an orange hat. We love orange at Firebelly. So we're excited to have you, Michael. Michael, let's start out by, I've done, a fairly adequate job of saying who you are. If you could just describe yourself in a couple, 3 sentences, Michael, tell everyone who you are.
So I first and foremost, I'm a daddy, and a husband and a son and a friend, most importantly. And secondly, I'm an entrepreneur that's taken a path with the time that I have here to try to make an impact on others and leave a legacy for my children, and hopefully make the world a little bit better and give people and their families opportunity.
Well, that's awesome, Michael. I love that you started with that. Having gone through end of life situations with both my parents who were struggling, with old age and like end of life kind of like predicaments, that I always tell them like, hey, hey, Dad, you're a good son, you're a good father. And because at the end of the day, those are the things that really matter. All the other shit doesn't really matter. And I love that you started out with that. Tell me this, where did your journey with Infuse truly begin? I've read some of it, failed dishwasher, revolutionary, traveler, adventurer. Where did it all start for you?
Well, I just want to correct that I didn't fail at dishwashing. I'm still a very good dishwasher. They wouldn't let me and sometimes I'm still a dishwasher. They just wouldn't let me remain as a dishwasher. But I think my dishwashing was a great success. And, started working at the age of 12, was in a situation where I needed to help to contribute to my family. And my parents really, they did a very good job in teaching me that you're not entitled to anything in this world. You have to work hard for it. And if you want something, you have to earn it. And so, always working and working my way through the industry. And my mom, I think when I was 14, she said, oh, maybe you'll go into the restaurant industry. I said, absolutely not. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this. And ended up in the restaurant industry and worked my way through. And really, the goal was to become an executive of a restaurant company. That's as a young person. And so I accomplished that. And then I figured out that even as an executive of somebody else's company, you're not always in control. And so found the perfect time to become an entrepreneur. My wife was pregnant with my first of 4 children. And I think about a week before my daughter Sadie was born, my wife had a last ultrasound. And she came out of the ultrasound. I was in the waiting room and I had missed everything in my life to get to where I was because I was working 80, 100 hours a week. I wanted to be a good company person. I missed weddings, funerals, really important things.
Mm.
And when my wife became pregnant, I freaked out. For lack of a better word, I couldn't put my finger on it. After a couple of months, I figured out I was depressed. And I would look in the mirror, and here, I accomplished what I had thought I wanted. I wanted to be an executive. Here I am, an executive. And when my wife, Sari, became pregnant, it's like somebody had switched out my eyes. And all of a sudden I'm looking around, I'm going, oh, that's somebody's daughter. That's somebody's mom. That's somebody's brother or sister. And before, it was about, driving a stock price and driving productivity. And it was very impersonal. And all of a sudden it hit me. And I became petrified of looking back on my last breath and wondering, what if? And what scared me even more is that, when my father passed away, my father was a clergyman. I had thousands of people reach out to me with stories about my dad. Your dad helped me when my mom was sick. Your dad married me. Your dad counseled me. Your dad named my child. Your dad buried my husband. And they would tell me meaningful stories. And I said, what are the stories that someone's going to tell this child? Oh, your dad was so good. He got the stock from $2 to $28. That wasn't the legacy that I wanted to leave. And so while I followed a different path than my father, I wanted to do something different. And so my wife walked out of her ultrasound. She goes, what are you doing here? I thought you had a meeting. I always had a meeting. I had missed everything. I hadn't been at an ultrasound. I had the most important thing in life. And I turned to her that day and said, I'm going to quit my job. And I want to start my own companies where people are the most important thing. And the legacy is no one's going to count my things when I'm gone. The legacy is what people are going to say about me when I'm gone to this child. And my wife, who's the nicest person ever on the planet, is 5 feet tall in heels and from Minnesota, had some choice words for me that included, we just bought a house and I'm about to give birth and get your ass back to work. And I said, well, the good news is that
Yes.
the good news is that I've quit my job. I have no job and no plan other than I really need to do this. And that started my journey as an entrepreneur, which it wasn't about making money. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about anything other than, at that time, what is someone going to come and say one day when I'm gone to this child? So now there's 4 of them, so I'm even more stressed. But that's kind of how it all got started. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that journey, and we'll talk about the success. And I think one of the philosophies that has driven our success and why people want to do business with us is that I don't believe that my children are any more important than anyone else's children. And when people join my organizations, they owe me nothing and I owe them everything. And so when I go to bed at night, it scares the hell out of me how many people I'm responsible for. And that's why I jump out of bed at 4 a.m. running to do my work, is that same responsibility and the excitement at the opportunity to create change in people's lives and treat them and give them opportunities that I wasn't given throughout my career. And so that's what started my journey as an entrepreneur.
That's an amazing story. I love the fact that you put people first. I mean, that's one of the things that we believe at Firebelly, and one of the things I tell people in general and specifically for social is put people first. Like, they're the most important thing you can do. I think your organization and your philosophy have so many different facets to them that make them mission driven. But I think the people first piece is truly outstanding. And so you've built several companies, and you're doing innovative and revolutionary things. Let's talk about something that you're really excited about right now. What's really giving you some thrills?
Well, I think we're at an interesting time. We'll talk about our organization, Infuse Hospitality, which, as you referenced, a contract food service for the modern day and really only limited by the scope of the imagination. And so the thesis when we started this company in 2015, 2016, was that people who are working for a company, commercial real estate, hotels, shopping centers, all trying to reinvent themselves, to acquire and retain talent, to get people to lease space from them, to give them a reason to come to their hotel. And in a changing world of traditional retail, we felt everything was truly antiquated, and that today's consumer, when you think about going to the cafeteria in your school, in your workplace, it hasn't evolved over the decades. And today's consumer, today's workforce, they don't differentiate where their experience there versus where they're walking to on a Thursday and posting on Instagram. And so we felt that the model and what was available out there, from some of the large institutional contract, food service companies, was contract food service companies will make money 17 different ways until their client says mercy. For us, it was, how do we look through their lens and be a great strategic partner that can provide phenomenal solutions for them at scale all throughout North America, where we see holistically the experience that's trying to be created. And so what's interesting is that while we had some great success as we started, and then 3 years of COVID really proved out our hypothesis in the need for this change, and has made us busier than ever, where people are looking to us for our, not only the ability to execute, but to provide the strategic vision, and really understand that we're just a small piece of the puzzle. And so while we're serving food and beverage, what we're really doing is creating experiences and strategy with spaces and making people feel a certain way. And so what everybody is struggling to do now, we said was critically important before COVID. And COVID has only made what we do more critically important.
That's amazing. What are some of the things you do or you all think about when you're making spaces more interesting?
We get really deep. And it depends on the space, right? Hotels are different than commercial real estate, and commercial real estate is different from shopping malls or universities or corporate campuses. But as an example, in the world of commercial real estate, where we're talking about a retail space or amenity floors or food halls, whatever the case may be, we're going in there, and the first question I ask to the ownership group is, is this asset a long-term hold or a short-term hold? And they laugh and they go, no one sitting in that seat has ever asked us the question. How interesting. I said, well, if I'm looking at it from your perspective and I'm here to be a good strategic partner to you, I need to begin with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And so if you're looking to sell this asset in 4 years, or you're going to keep this for, 3 generations to come, it changes the strategy, and I need to better understand that so that I can propose a perfect solution for you. And so I think, we do a lot of diligence in understanding the ownership group. Why was the investment made? What's the return? What's the entire experience? And what does it look like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road? And where other people come in and say, we do this, pick from package A, B, or C. I'm not really trying to sell anything to anybody. I'm trying to be a strategic partner that has a seat at the table, that's giving them the ammo that they need to win. And whether that's sharing data or being extremely creative, that's where I think we found great success, is that I don't have hundreds of thousands of clients. I have a core set of clients, and we say no to a lot of folks, but this core set of clients has said, man, where have you been the last 20 years? And here's the rest of the portfolio. What do we do where? And that's really our model, is that we make money at scale. And, sometimes we're just coming in with a guest's perspective, with big eyes and big ears, and talking about things that have nothing to do with food and beverage, the lighting in the parking garage, the music, the experience. And we're giving them data and examples from Disney to whatever you can imagine about creating these immersive experiences, which is super critical nowadays.
That's such a phenomenal point. The experience, the guest experience, because I think there's such an emphasis in in spaces to do one thing. Oh, we're just going to do this one thing. And it's like, yeah, especially if you're going out and you're putting food or, beverages inside your body. I mean, there's trust involved with that. You want to feel comfortable. I mean, even if you're eating functionally, you want to be able to be in an optimal moment, in an optimal space. And that's amazing. The music, the level of sound or no sound, what are you looking at? I think there's a word for all of that, right? It's all the sensory experiences of being in a space so that by the time you eat, you're already completely immersed.
Correct. And when you look at, and one of the things that we focus on as an organization is the beauty of diversity. And that diversity really is what makes the world interesting. And in celebrating that diversity, we also understand, as you look at different cultures throughout the world, it's food and beverage has been the nucleus of community for thousands of years. And when you talk to somebody, tell me about your home, tell me where you grew up, and they light up about the memories they have of walking into the abuela's kitchen, and the smells and the beauties and the learning to cook and the music that would be played. And so we try to take all of that and understand that creating a beautiful memory or spurring a beautiful memory and all of that is really critical to having a psychological impact on the consumer. And so, at the end of them telling me the data and what they're trying to get, that's where I turn in and say, you need a tiki bar with a Ferris wheel, or you need a steakhouse, or you need, this. That's where the beauty is that our incredible teams, from culinary to marketing to operations to finance and accounting, is, you're dealing with a group that has high level institutional reporting and processes and procedures, but the nimbleness and entrepreneurial spirit of true entrepreneurs. And so that's really the key, is that it's very difficult for my behemoth institutional competitors to be able to zig and zag like that, but we have no restrictions on our ability to do that. That's really a winning formula where, you can have the same group operating a Michelin rated, full service retail restaurant or a steakhouse or a bar or an amenity floor, and can literally do anything. And as you said earlier, are only limited by the scope of the imagination. That's a very, very powerful tool for our clients to be able to have as part of the solutions.
I love and think about, for me to think about, where you mentioned, food and beverage is the nucleus of community, and how many people who run food and beverage companies to think about that. Because you really hear, like, we were, recently at a couple of different shows, or earlier last year with the sweets and snacks show, and you hear people talking about this, one fact or feature or point of difference, but there's not a lot of people thinking about the memory, right? And the memory is a lot of different things, and you're starting with the memory. It's like, I think the fact that you're asking that question, is this a long-term asset or is it a short-term asset? It's like, I think it's fair to say that you start with the end in mind.
Always. We don't come in and say, here's what we sell. We sit down and we truly listen. If you're speaking, it's very difficult to listen. And so we take everything in as much as we possibly can. And we use the data that we have and the data that our clients are giving us. And we found that that's a great formula. People oftentimes have difficulty listening. They also work in an environment where they're afraid of being creative or going out on a limb. They're afraid of what the response from their bosses would be. They're not willing to take the risk. And in our company, it's okay to fail. And it's okay to do the wrong thing. And, one of the things that I've learned in working for other organizations is that they're so quick to throw away the baby with the dirty bathwater. But most of the things that I've learned in my career are things that I did wrong, mistakes that I made, or being wise enough to watch and learn from others' mistakes. And so I'm grateful when people make mistakes. That means that they're trying. That means that they're putting forth effort, and they're going out there to do something different. And so I think that it's difficult in other organizations where people would rather stay quiet, and they don't want to take the risk of being looked poorly upon on their bosses. I think organizations make a huge mistake in having an environment like that, where, it's easier just to say yes and go along. And, that's not fun. And so we are not perfect. We learn from our mistakes and we make decisions based on data. But there's never, ever been a time in our organization where someone said something and I turned and said, well, that's just a crazy idea. The crazier it is, the more I like it, is the matter of fact.
You're a consummate traveler and a believer in the value of adventure. Tell us about something crazy. I think you mentioned there's a story from Medellin we might need to hear, but you pick something interesting from your travels and adventures.
I do love traveling, and I'll tell you that on an average day, and I travel a ton, and on an average day, I'm walking 10 to 18 miles because that's how I can really feel the energy of what's going on. But my first time to Colombia, incredible country if you haven't been. My first time to Colombia was really me turning to one of my partners saying, how do we know what we're supporting? When we're buying coffee and slave labor and this and that. We're talking about going to the tea farms. And I said, well, I speak none of the language, but my Spanish is pretty good. And so we set off on a trip to Colombia to check in on them, right? As arrogant Americans. And so set off on my trip to Colombia on Copa Airlines. By the way, I decided to I hadn't watched Narcos, so I watched Narcos on the flight over, which is not at all what I found in Colombia. What I found in Colombia was the most beautiful people really living life. And so our first day out to the farm, we had to drive about 2.5 hours. From Medellin out into the mountains and then down again. And traveling on these dirt roads, I call them roads. They're not really roads. You can barely fit all four wheels of the truck. And so, you're 4,000 feet in the air, and then comes a coffee truck, down the other direction. So now you're going backwards 1.5 miles, with tires hanging off the cliff. And it occurred to me halfway through, I said, this is not a Disney ride. That's a long way down and there's no fence. And so we're literally risking our lives to get to the farm. We get to the base of it where the head of the farm is also the doctor for the village. And we travel another 10, 15 minutes and get to the village. And, they're showing us the coffee, they're showing us around the farm. And I, of course, wander off, and there's this little house surrounded by banana trees and mandarins, and there's a little 5-year-old boy. And the 5-year-old boy sees me, and he's on the patio surrounding the house, and he kicks a soccer ball to me. I kick the soccer ball back. He looks at me and he kicks the ball the other direction into a bush. I go get it out of the bush. He's laughing. I bring it back to him. This goes on for about an hour. During that time, there's horses running by. His uncle comes by from the farm and is rubbing his head. His dad comes for lunch and is giving him a hug. His aunt and his mom are cooking lunch, for everybody. They're all sitting down, eating together, and just, watching the whole family participate in the view, I said a couple times, I go, can this be real? This majestic view. And they said, no, it's actually fake. We created it, for you. In jest, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And after a day of almost dying a couple times, that's another story, on horseback in a tropical storm in the rainforest, and this far to getting kicked off of the ledge. But on the 2-hour drive back, I really didn't talk. I didn't really speak. And what was going through my mind is that I came here to check on them. But realistically, these are people who understand the importance and values of family, and that our most valuable resource in life is our time. We don't know how much of it we have. And when we spend it, it's gone. And after the way that I saw them living and enjoying every moment and being together with their family, I came to the conclusion that realistically, maybe they should be coming to the United States to check on me and save me, because we're doing it backwards. And it really shifted the way that I think and I look at things. And having grown up poor, when I started my journey as an entrepreneur, I was never afraid of being poor. I was afraid of looking back and wondering what if. And so whether it's traveling to Colombia or other parts of the world, I really see the beauty and the diversity. And every time it comes down to the same thing, the celebration of history and embracing history and beautiful cultures, and the commitment to family, and really having an understanding of time. In our country and in what we're doing every day, we really get so down into the details that it's hard to, rise above it and look at it. And you think about watches, right? Like, it used to be that you'd say, I'm going to come over sometime in the afternoon. And when the sun looked like it was, sometime in the afternoon, you would arrive. And then it became, okay, well, we had watches or we had clocks, but give or take 5-10 minutes, you'd arrive at now you look at the clock and you go, oh, I'm, 2/100ths of a second late for a call, and having anxiety. And so really, it allows me to recalibrate how I look at time. And it reinforces the priorities that I have in life, which is why I started the conversation today with I'm someone's son and I'm someone's daddy. And that's why we do it. The things that we do along the way, God willing, when I'm gone, I'm going to leave the world a little bit better than it was. And people are going to say, let me tell you a story about your daddy. And, my travels really, really reinforce how different things have become every decade in our lives here in America. And that we're just, a tiny piece of a big, beautiful world.
Love it. Love it. I have questions about accessibility and fairgrounds, coffee, among others. But Arnell, you look like you're thinking about a question. You got one there?
I do have a question. So, Infuse Hospitality has lots of different brands, restaurant brands, and Fairgrounds being one of them. For other people who are listening, people who are maybe getting started in their restaurant, what is just a piece of advice that you have for them? What is something that you think was necessary for success in this industry?
I think companies are really backwards. And it's so simple, right? Like, I see organizations, the bigger they get, the more they put these layers in place. They make things super complicated. You have this fancy ivory tower and these boardrooms. In the beginning, when you've started, like when I start companies, I'll tell you, it's very fancy. Usually it's a paper napkin and a crayon or a colored pencil. And I try to keep it that simple. Like, my advice is to never forget where you came from. And for me, if I decide to leave, if I want to take my family to Mexico for 2 months, if I want to go disappear in Hawaii, the company's still functioning. let me know what happens when the dishwasher doesn't show up on a Friday night. And so who's the most important person, me or the dishwasher? And I still believe it that way. And so if I'm sitting in a meeting, I've got all of these super talented people giving me all these thoughts and hypotheses and this and that. But realistically, if I want to know the answer, I'll call and talk to the dishwasher, or I'll call and talk to the host, and they'll tell me what's going on, and they'll give me 3 different ways I can fix it. And so I think people overcomplicate things. I think people get impressed with titles. I would like the title of head dishwasher. That's another thing people won't allow me to have. But I think that it's critically important to not forget why you're doing it and where you've come from. And I also think it's critically important to have a strategic plan. And so we start our organizations, we have these vision documents. And the idea of the vision document is whether it's 3 weeks, 3 years, 3 decades later, you could be in a meeting and someone says, well, we really need to be doing this. And you go, wait a second. And you go back to your original vision document. You say, that's fine. But this is our original vision. And what you're saying is totally not in line. And so do we want to amend and reinstate the original vision? Or are we going down a path that we shouldn't be? And so I think, people need to these are very simple businesses. Mm-hmm. We're not operating on people's children, realistically. And so we shouldn't take ourselves that seriously. I'm giving people the most used drug in the planet, caffeine, followed by sugar, alcohol, and carbs. Like, how important is what I'm doing? And so I think that having an understanding of who the most important people, why we're doing it, and following a plan is the advice that I would give. You mentioned Fairgrounds we created as an example of our expertise in coffee and tea because there were things that I just didn't understand, right? Like, we would break from a meeting and 2 people would go to La Colombe. One person would go to Blue Bottle. One person would go to Verve. One person would go to Starbucks. No one could go to the same place, right? And God forbid somebody wanted tea, they'd have to go to a different place. Oh, and if you wanted to eat, that's a whole other place. Then we'd go to dinner. There'd be 150 different beers on tap. I said, this is crazy. There's no variety and choice in coffee. I go to this place, I can only get their coffee. That makes no sense to me. And why haven't the consumers demanded choice? And everybody because the roasters are artists and they're giving this, that. I said, we have our own training and education team. I don't need them to train and educate. And I understand how to protect the integrity of their product. And so Fairgrounds Coffee and Tea was created because I felt that the world of specialty coffee was aloof and unapproachable. They talk about growing their craft. And then I'd be walking down Abbot Kinney in Venice Beach. I'd walk into a coffee shop. I have all of these holdings in the world of coffee and food and beverage, but I don't have the twisty mustache and wasn't wearing the right clothes. And, they're spreading their craft by turning and saying, what the hell do you want, old man? Get the hell out of here. Because you're not part of you don't look like you fit in our circle of trust. That made no sense to me. I didn't understand why also very masculine and absent of service and hospitality. I never woke up in the morning going, I want to go to that place with 30,000 locations, with the green logo and take food with additives and preservatives that have been frozen since before they were born and put that into them. Meanwhile, if I go to Europe, I go to the Middle East, you wake up, do I want to go to a cafe or a restaurant? The only difference is one's 3 hours and one's, 30 minutes. You can get great beverages and great chef-crafted food all in the same place. And it was bizarre to me that in this country that tea played second fiddle. Tea has been the most important beverage for thousands and thousands of years. So we created Fairgrounds in Coffee and Tea to be a place where you can try roasters from all over the country. You can get flights of different kombuchas, different cold brews, sparkling botanicals, chef-crafted food in an environment that is lovely. And there's service and hospitality. And whether you're 8 or 80, there's something there that you love. I took that. I put in a lot of personal details from the color of it to swings where you can watch the brew bar where they do the pour overs. And, we use Fairgrounds to show our capabilities in coffee and tea, but really it was created to solve for something that I found to be lacking, consumer and choice. And so it would be crazy to walk into a bar and see 150 taps and have somebody turn and say, would you like Budweiser or Budweiser? You'd say, excuse me. And so I felt that we could create that change. And so that's how Fairgrounds Craft Coffee and Tea came to be.
It's really the story really like kind of pivots around accessibility and choice and sort of fair representation.
Yeah, and celebrating diversity. The name Fairgrounds really came from the fairgrounds of our youth. Some people, their idea of I said my wife is from Minnesota. Like her idea of the fairgrounds is the Minnesota State Fair, where you go eat awful things as much as you can until you feel sick, fried everything on the planet. And other ideas of the fairgrounds, would be going to a Dave Matthews show, a Grateful Dead show, a Fish show, and at the fairgrounds. But for a lot of people, the idea of the fairgrounds is local fairs and communities where they bring in the rides and the games. And realistically, as a child, that may have been the first time that you were given the opportunity for variety and choice. Your parents set you off with a roll of tickets, and you said, I'm going to go on that ride, I'm going to play that game, and you got to chart your own adventure. And so the idea of the fairgrounds is, where we tapped in our youth and first experienced variety and choice. And however your idea of the fairgrounds, whether it's the state fair or the amusement park or a concert, it spurs once again memories from the past and displays the beauty of variety and choice and diversity in the music that we play, in the design of the space and where you can sit, and most importantly, in our incredibly amazing and talented people.
I love it. How about some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
Favorite song?
One Day by Matas Yahoo.
Love it. Favorite kind of tea to drink?
Favorite kind of tea. So I'm in Chicago where it's about 100 below zero. I'm going to go with turmeric ginger. I think having the natural anti-inflammatory of the turmeric as well as the benefits of the ginger is a favorite for me. Second, by like a light coconut oolong tea.
Ooh, a coconut oolong. I have not tried that. And with that turmeric ginger, is it one of your own teas, or is there a brand that you prefer?
My buddy Josh, who is the founder and owner of Rishi Tea, is one of the largest importer of mangoes in the United States.
Wow.
Josh spends 9 months of the year away from his family, traveling throughout Southeast Asia to procure the most beautiful ingredients you can find. I highly recommend our wonderful partners over at Rishi. I think that they have an incredible product. And what's interesting is that they also white label. So there's teas out there that you may be drinking that you think isn't Rishi that may have come from Rishi. So I highly recommend Rishi. Very accessible. You can find them at Whole Foods and many other stores throughout the country, many restaurants. But a big fan of what they're doing over at Rishi.
I got to tell you, that turmeric ginger tea is next to perfect. I mean, I am a deep lover of tea. And I don't think there's any caffeine in it, but man, it's like, I'm a big believer the dal, Indian dal, right? Is like a warm hug, but man, the turmeric ginger tea is also like a warm hug. It is just amazing.
Yeah. Listen, it depends too, like talk about memories, when you think of walking through the streets of India and having, coming here and on a fall day, having a warm tea, a chai tea latte, with oat milk, that the smell brings me to another world. Again, a warm hug. And we talk with a lot of people, about the importance of matcha. And people oftentimes they're caffeinating themselves with espresso. Matcha has a different chemical component, where it's more of a body high than a head high. It's sustained and there's no crash. And so we advise a lot of sports teams and other agencies that they really should be drinking matcha for many different reasons versus coffee and espresso. So don't forget about the importance of matcha.
Love it. What's your favorite thing to cook?
My favorite thing to listen. I'm a chef, going back a bit, and so while I can cook for celebrities, I can't even cook macaroni and cheese that my children will eat. They need mom to cook it. But for me, it's all of the amazing things that I've created. I love cooking things that I remember my grandparents cooking or my great grandparents cooking, because it transports me to a different time. And the ability to share that with my 4 children and the stories and the memories is really so beautiful. And I think a lot of us, it's, when we're not feeling well, we're depressed, we're this, you cook something that you remember sitting with your grandparents eating. It's like caffeine for the soul. And so I love to cook things that take me back to when I'm 5, 6 years old, standing in the kitchen cooking with my parents or my grandparents.
Love it. What's your favorite movie, or a movie you love to watch?
I love documentaries. I'm so fascinated by documentaries. But for me, I'm a sucker for a feel good, inspirational movie. And it's hard for me to say, because I've been forcing my children now to watch all of the movies from the 70s and 80s growing up. And I may have made them watch Ferris Bueller about 7 times now, and Homo. And so I think, I got to go with Top Gun as an all-time favorite, because as a kid, I would leave that movie and we'd ride around with my buddy David on our bicycles, and we'd put the little playing card in there so it made a sound and pretend like we were, fighter pilots. But I'll go with that one for now.
Well, Michael, this has been phenomenal. We've just enjoyed the conversation so much. How can our listeners find you?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, check us out at www.infusehospitality.com. They can follow me on Instagram at Caffeine Doctor, or YouTube at Caffeine Doctor. Facebook and obviously for those in the professional world, LinkedIn. Very grateful this last week having hit 10,000 followers. And so try to put things on LinkedIn that I feel will be inspirational or helpful for others in the industry. But you can check me out at all of those places.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Firebelly Social Show. I'm your host, Duncan Olney. We've been here with Michael Schultz and Arnell Mitchell. And it's been a blast. It's been brought to you by Firebelly Marketing, where brands come to tell their stories via social media marketing. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Thanks for listening to the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.